Jaime Munguia fails his drug test. Not good. And then he goes and puts out a statement that's very just scripted. Obviously, the type of typical statement you're going to see from a fighter, discussing the facts of the matter. I didn't do it. I'm going to get retested. And sure, he deserves that credit. We'll see what happens in the B sample. We'll see. He still has time. I'm not going to officially convict him of this yet. But let me say this. He got upset in the upset of the year in 2024, just a few months ago. He switched his team from being a part of his old company into the Eddy Reynoso camp. And here's an interesting thing. There's a pattern of PED violation with the Reynoso camp. And I don't want to throw out exact accusations right now, but I would like to see some form of investigation placed into this camp. Because listen to this list. Canelo Alvarez, Oscar Valdez, Julio Cesar Martinez, Luis Neri, and now Jaime Munguia. They have all been having PED violations while being a part of the Reynoso gym. That's questionable if you ask me. One gym is producing this many guys that pop positive for PEDs. That seems suspicious if you ask me. 1, okay, sure. 2, all right, it's interesting, but all right, we'll let it slide. 3, all right. 4, okay, this is getting a little rough. And now we're at 5. 5 guys that's been a part of the Reynoso camp have all popped positive for their PEDs. Munguia now being the 5th one. The truth of the matter here, what's crazy with the statement is that, okay, if this is true, and it appears it is, that Jaime Munguia was actually on PEDs in his most recent fight against Bruno Suras, that he didn't look that good. Let's just be 100% brutally honest here. When we look at Jaime Munguia, he's a guy that was going against Canelo Alvarez just about a year ago. He's a guy that had positioned himself again as after his most recent win, that people were saying, okay, maybe he's back. He's going to go fight for a top guy at 168. No. He was okay in that fight. He was not spectacular. He got the job done, but once again, for Bruno Suras, he was not a guy that was ever really looked at as a great fighter prior to his massive upset of Jaime Munguia. And he didn't really look very good in his most recent fight either. Nor did Jaime Munguia, but Jaime Munguia didn't enough to get the job done. So I was already questionable about him at 168 going forward, and now we find out that he was on PEDs in that fight, and it didn't really help him very much, to be honest. But it's a very questionable situation here. Because here's the fact. What must happen is that if this is confirmed with the B sample, that Munguia was on PEDs in that fight, here's the facts of the matter. Automatically that fight turns to a no contest, and it looks really, really bad at Jaime Munguia. And I say this because, listen, if Jaime Munguia was on PEDs in his fight against Bruno Suras, then that is not a good look on him. For 2 reasons. First of all, PEDs are unacceptable. There can be no toleration of that in boxing. And while that fight was being monitored by BBFC, overall standards in America right now, we need, in the whole world of boxing, we need to make there be a much more strict punishment for PEDs. There's a personal opinion on that. That needs to get adjusted really, really quickly. But let's get back on topic. When you look at the performance that Jaime Munguia had, you should have went out there and dominated Bruno Suras anyways. Then you add in the fact that you were mixing that pot, some PEDs in that fight, and you still look the way you did in that fight. That's questionable. That's not a good look for yourself. And if you were, in fact, on PEDs against Bruno Suras and you still look the way you did, then guess what? Your career is really hanging on by the balance because you just got brutally KO'd in an embarrassing fashion at your home fight back in December. And now we fast forward to your rematch and you look fine. You got the job done, but you're now popping positive for PEDs. No, that's questionable work right there. And if I'm going to be honest right now, he needs to have that fight turn a no contest immediately. And I'm not sure he's going to give him a big fight because his name is no longer that big. And secondly, when you look at Jaime Munguia, he's not really a big threat. Right now, he's not a threat. The way he looked in his 2 most recent fights, he is not a threat. Even if you go to the Canelo fight, he was not a threat in that fight at all. And so he really has not been a threat for a minute now. And on top of that, now you're popping positive for PEDs. Just an embarrassing thing. Now, as I said, I'm not going to go on a full-on rip him to shreds yet because we still have to wait for the B sample. I'll give him his due diligence and make sure I give him this proper timing. But the fact of the matter is that this happened, and on one of his samples, he tested positive for PEDs. That's unacceptable. And the other aspect I want to really make sure I get into here is what I talked about in the very beginning of the segment. That listen, the Eddy Reynoso camp has to be investigated to some extent. Now, I don't know exactly the legality aspects of this, how exactly you're going to pull that out, so on and so forth. But what I do know right now is this. If you are going to be a boxing team and you're going to be the people that's going to be looking into the legality issues of boxing, and you have a certain camp have this many fighters test positive for PEDs in a certain time span involving Canelo Alvarez, Oscar Valdez, Julio Cesar Martinez, Luis Nery, and Jaime Munguia, that is questionable. And we're at the point in time right now where it's unacceptable if we're not going to look into the situation, what's happening in this camp. There needs to be some form of investigation done to look into this camp and why these guys keep testing positive for PEDs. Because it's been happening too much now for us to say it's a coincidence. It's happening too much now for us to say, you know what, we can keep turning a blind eye to what's happening with Eddy Reynoso. Is Eddy Reynoso a great trainer? Yes. I don't want to discredit that aspect. But PEDs need to be outlawed from boxing 100%. And in my opinion, the consequences are not severe enough yet for the sport of boxing. There needs to be more consequences for PEDs than any other thing right now. That needs to be addressed immediately. Guys are not being held accountable for PED use. It's unacceptable. And then we're going to get all these excuses. Oh, I didn't mean to do it. Listen, if you pop positive for PEDs in the NBA or NFL, you're going to have a certain amount of punishment that's already outlined for you, depending on the type of PEDs you take and depending on how many times you've been caught before doing so. That needs to happen in boxing. There is too much of the situation in boxing right now where it's, hey, you're going to get 6 months. You're going to get a year. You're getting 2 years. You're getting 3 years. You're going to get no suspension. And that's getting ridiculous. There needs to be a fine guidelines as to what the punishment is for PED usages, and then that needs to be upheld and actually carried out. Because what we're seeing time and time again is that these fighters are continuing to get away with PEDs, and there's not really a big punishment. And let me be honest right now. While I hate it and it makes you look horrible as a fighter, if your punishment is to go have a massive victory, and on top of that, you're going to be utilizing PEDs, but you only have to sit out now for about a year. You only have to sit out for a little bit of time. Then that's ridiculous. Now, is a year a lot for fighters to stay inactive? Sure. But at the large scale of things, the amount of money you can make, the big fight you can get, so on and so forth, if you get caught using PEDs and you get a big performance and you're only going to sit out a year, I don't think a lot of fighters are going to pass that up. When you have fighters, for example, Terrence Bud Crawford and others, that are A-OK staying out a year. Some fighters only fight a year anyways. And so there needs to be a much stricter consequences when it comes to PED usages in boxing right now, because I think there's a legitimate problem when it comes to that in boxing.